Well, hello and welcome back to our fourth training in becoming a group leader here at Landing Place Church. Up to this point, the trainings have been more about our group strategy, but moving forward, the remaining two videos are going to be more practical about how-to tips about being a successful group leader in general. So I want to start off by using a visual for you about how to really structure your group. The details of a group are kind of like a trellis in a garden. For those of you who are not familiar, a trellis is a structure that you put in your garden. It helps plants grow in a certain direction, really the way they're supposed to grow. Now, if you don't provide this kind of structure to the vines and the plants, they will grow organically. However, they're going to grow everywhere. And in time, the truth of the matter is the vines are going to get to the place where they're actually going to end up choking the life out of your plant. A trellis allows the plants to have a place to wrap around, the framework and the structure that allows the vines to grow straight up and healthy, and it keeps them from killing off the plant. Well, in the same way, when we have great plans and details in our group structure, it's just like that trellis. It's going to help your group be very directional, it's going to have the right culture, it's going to work really well, and it won't end up choking the life out of your group. So to give you a good start, I want you to have 4 questions that we're going to have you answer that you're going to have giving you the details you need to have a successful group launch. The first question that I want you to be thinking about is, where's my group going to be located? You honestly have several choices of places that your group can meet in. You can meet in your home, you can meet at a neighborhood clubhouse, you can meet at a room in the church building, you can meet at your workplace, you can meet at a coffee house. There's probably many other places you can meet, but these are just some suggestions of places you might think to meet. Now, every location has pros and cons, and I want you to be thinking through the pros and cons. Some of those things are things like, how many people can fit in this location comfortably? That's important. Geographically, is this location centralized where people can get to it easily, or is it going to be hard for some people to get to compared to others? And then, can you hold group there weekly? Depending on the location you're at. If it's not your own personal home, you need to think about, can we still have group here every week? These are just some of the considerations you want to have when you're thinking about where your group's going to meet. Question number 2 is, what day and time will the group meet? The day and time of group is really important to be thinking about because it's going to filter out who can and can't participate in your group. Let me give you a couple of examples. If you choose a night during the week, that may or may not be easy for parents with young children to attend that group. It might be difficult because they may have to get home early to put their kids to bed, or they may have school activities. If you choose a Saturday, any family that has their kids in activities, in sports and things of that nature, typically that happens on Saturday. They're probably going to be out, and so that may not be the best time if you're looking for a group with families with small children or young children. If you want to bring in younger professionals, maybe who are not married yet or don't have children yet, a later start time probably is going to be better for them because that's going to give them the time to get home from work and get over to the group. If you do want parents with those young children, maybe Sunday afternoon might be a great time to think about meeting as well. Point is you want to really think through the day and time, and that's really going to determine who you're going to attract to your group. So if you have a certain group of people you want to attract, what is the best day and time to meet with them? Also, you want to think about snacks. Providing snacks is always a great idea, but depending on what day and time you meet will determine the kind of snack you're going to provide. If it is a weeknight meeting, light snacks would probably be just fine. Whereas if you're asking people to come directly from work, you might want to think about, do I provide some sort of a dinner? These are just more considerations to have when you're thinking about what day and time will our group meet. The third question that we want you to be thinking about is, when should we launch the group? Once you decide the day and time, the location, you need to choose your launch date. Now, we would encourage you to launch your group at one of the beginnings of a trimester. That means that launching a group in August or May or January would be great times because that's going to get people launching during the time we normally have trimesters. Groups can launch at other times for sure, but you want to make some considerations about the timing. I'll give you an example. November is probably a terrible time to start a new group because you're going to run into Thanksgiving, Christmas, and New Year's, which are going to be weeks that your group members are probably going to be traveling or not available. So it's really going to hurt having that continuity in group that you're looking for. So really just be thinking about when is the best time to launch this group and launch it during that time. We're going to help you in figuring out the best time to launch a new group. The fourth question we want you to be thinking about is how long should the group meet? We ask groups to meet, as I said before, to meet for 2 of the 3 trimesters each year. And groups can decide if they want to continue to meet additional trimesters or additional years, but at least committing to those 2 trimesters is what's best. Unless you're doing a very specific curriculum, that might lead to you not leading your group, but more than 1 trimester. So for instance, if you have a specific curriculum you're doing that may last like 14 weeks, example of those would be things like Financial Peace University or divorce care. At the end of that 14 weeks, that group might be over and it may disband and those folks may go into a different group. Unless that group says we would like to continue on in a different study. That is also a possibility as well. But it's not uncommon if you're running one of those specific curriculums to disband at the end of the 14 weeks. But unless you're going to be doing one of those types of groups, we're going to encourage you to think about how long is that group going to meet and how do you maintain that moving forward. Now, once you've answered these 4 questions, you have the foundation set for your group. However, there are a few other items that I want you to consider for your group. And that is, what type of group are we going to have? Let me explain what I mean by that. Is your group going to be an open group versus a closed group? An open group simply means it's open to new people joining at any point of the group. Closed groups are closed to people after the first few weeks. So it's open for maybe a 2-week period or 3-week period to recruit people in. But once that period ends, the group's closed and you can't add any new people to the group moving forward. Open groups are a great way to meet new people. There's always an opportunity to join the group because any week that people can jump in. There are a few challenges though to open groups that I want to bring to your attention. With new people being allowed to join at any time, it is harder sometimes to build relationships because people keep coming in, and confidentiality is not as easy to maintain in an open group. Do want you to be thinking about that. Closed groups are a great way to build deeper and more long-term relationships. Once people join you, they get to know people over time, they get to build those relationships that are more deeper. Confidentiality is much easier to maintain, and there's even a level of accountability that can be built. However, closed groups also have one downside to them, and that is that you don't really get a chance to bring in new people all the time. And sometimes new people bring in new elements and new energy. Sometimes things can get a little stale in a group that's closed. So that's something you want to think about as well. Another consideration is short-term versus ongoing. Short-term groups are only designed to last a certain amount of time, as I mentioned before, like a certain curriculum or period of time that they're going to be on. Usually they disband after they're done, and then people either multiply into other groups or they continue on with the new curriculum. Ongoing groups stay together for at least 2 trimesters and perhaps even beyond, based on the desire of the group. And the goal of these groups eventually is hopefully to multiply and to continue to add new members to the group. But that's kind of a little bit of that trade-off there. Short-term groups can be easy to ramp up in the culture for people to join. You get people in a group for 6 or 8 weeks, you expose them to things, and then you move them on to an ongoing group. So that could be a great way of doing one of those initial groups. It allows them a taste of what community outside of the Sunday experience is like. So most short-term groups here at LPC are what we call care groups. We'll talk a little bit more of that here in a little bit. But that's kind of the idea around those short-term groups. Ongoing groups should be the goal for all people. Short-term groups are a ramp up to finally get people maybe into a group, but eventually we do always want to get people into an ongoing group in time. The one challenge to ongoing group is they can, as I said a moment ago, become stale and unhealthy. But the hope is that people in those groups after 2 trimesters or maybe a couple more trimesters eventually decide to multiply, and maybe some of those group members filter out, start new groups. The original group brings in new members and it brings new life into those groups. So that's one of those ways that you can try to get away from getting stale and kind of being unhealthy. So that's something to be thinking about with your groups. I also want you to be thinking about what type of group you have as far as who you're going to be serving. As I mentioned a moment ago, we have care groups. These groups can be at any location, and the leaders can meet wherever they want to with them. They can meet any day of the time. They can have any location, like I said, they wanted to be in. Usually they begin in a new trimester, and they're often open groups that are short term, meaning anybody can join them. They're for a specific period of time, and then they disband. These groups meet felt needs, things like finances, divorce, grief, parenting, things of that nature. Current care groups that we have are things like Financial Peace University, Grief Share, Divorce Care, Chronic Illness, Adoption Support, things like Celebrate Recovery. These are all what we would consider care groups. The next type of group we have are called mid-sized groups. These are groups that often meet in more of a large setting where people can attend. They usually meet less frequently, so maybe like once a month, and it's usually a bigger event. But they happen all year long, so they don't adhere to the trimester system. They're usually going to meet all 12 months to get together. And they're going to be an ongoing group where people can join at any time because it's open to people in those specific groups to join at any time. Currently, examples of this would be our Men's Warriors Way group and our Women's Collective group. They usually meet once a month. They usually have breakfast, worship time, a message is spoken, and then once a year, they'll have some sort of a bigger event. For the men, they call that an advance. For the women, they call that a retreat. Those are the kind of things that go on in what we would call a mid-sized group that are open to anybody to join. And then the final type are community groups. And this is what all other groups at Landing Place Church are considered, are community groups. We call them community groups because they're open to anyone in the community to join, and they usually happen in the community. That's why we call them community groups. And all the considerations that I talked about in this training that were presented apply to these groups. The one final consideration is who in that group might you be serving? And so do you have a group for men? Do you have a group for women? Do you have a group for couples? Do you have it for spiritual growth? Men and women's groups are pretty self-explanatory. They're groups specifically that men will join, women will join. Relationships are usually groups for married couples or people who are either dating or exploring the opportunity to get into a more meaningful relationship. And so they're looking at those kind of things as well. And then a spiritual growth group is kind of any other topic that kind of falls in those areas. Spiritual growth groups can be anything from prayer to reading the Bible, parenting, missions, any topic you can think of will probably fall in there, including, hey, we just want to get together and discuss this last week's message. Those are all great places for spiritual growth groups. Now you're asking yourself, so how do I get people into this group? How do I get my group growing once I understand all of these factors? Once you've gone through all the details of your group, it is time to get people to join. We want to help you to be successful as possible in launching your new group. And so we're going to help you to recruit, and we're also going to help you to advertise for your group. On our calendar, when we have the months of the gatherings, which are January, May, and August, those months we usually do some form of promotion as a church, where we're going to tell people it's time to get into a group. This is a fantastic time for you to recruit new people into your group, to advertise your group, to get people to join. We're going to help you to be very successful. We're going to give you all the resources you need to make that happen. We do promote our groups on our website and in person during Sunday experiences. People can join digitally or in person, whichever option works best for them. Our goal is to remove as many barriers as we can so it's not hard for people to get into groups. We're going to help you out with that. Now, to prepare to be leading a group, there are some questions you need to be prepared as a group leader to answer that we have found often people ask. These are the types of questions people ask. This list isn't exhaustive in that it's all questions, but they are the common questions we hear. People will ask you as you're launching a new group things like this. How much time is this going to take? Meaning, when I come for that group on that night, how long are we going to be there? What are we going to do with our children during this group meeting? You do want to think through how you're going to manage childcare, especially if you have families who have younger children. Is there going to be homework? Do I have to do things outside of the group time to prepare for the next group? Am I going to have to talk during these meetings? Is that going to be required of me? People want to know these things. Will I have to pray out loud? That's a big anxiety for some folks. They're going to want to know that from you. Who else will be in the group? They want to know what other people are joining this group. How much do I need to know about the Bible? Do I really need to be a scholar, or can I just come with the basic knowledge that I have? How many weeks or months is this group going to last? We talked about that earlier. It's something people are going to want to know. If I don't like the group, can I leave without people being angry with me? Some people may join your group after a few weeks, realize this isn't the group for them. Is it okay for them to bow out? Is that going to be all right? And then what are we actually going to do during these meetings? These are all great questions that we've heard people ask. I want you to be prepared for that. And we're actually going to talk more about that in the final training. And so one final piece of encouragement when it comes to recruiting people for your new group is make the ask. Personal invitations are the best way to get people into groups. I have found, and maybe you have too, that if I go to somebody and ask them to join a group, if I go up and say, hey, I'm starting a new group, this is what it's going to be about, this is when it's going to meet, this is who is in it, and I'd love for you to join, it's a lot more likely that they're going to join the group when you go out and ask. Certainly if we are standing promoting groups, you're behind a table, you have a sign-up sheet, people come and ask questions, they could join a group that way. But I have found, and maybe you have found as well, that when I go the extra step and say, hey, I'd like you to join my group, people are more likely to do that. So be thinking now, as you're preparing to start a new group, who am I going to ask to be part of my new group? It's going to get you a great leg up in getting more people to join your group once it's ready to launch. Well, we've covered a lot of ground in this training here today, but these are the pro tips that are going to set you up to have the best group leader experience possible. We're going to assign you that group coach I mentioned earlier. They're going to be right by your side. They're going to be to help you become very successful. You're not on your own on this journey. We want to help you be the best group coach, group leader you can, and the best coaches are going to help you do that. So I want to thank you for joining us for this video. I look forward to seeing you in the final video of this training, group video training number 5.